Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we're asking a chilling question. What if the big one isn't the end of the story? What if it's just the beginning? We tend to think of earthquakes as singular, terrifying events. The ground shakes violently, and then we brace for the aftershocks, smaller tremors as the crust settles. But a growing body of evidence suggests a far more complex and dangerous reality. What if one cataclysmic earthquake could be the unseen hand that pushes a neighboring fault, already teetering on the brink, into a devastating encore? This is the concept of a fault line cascade, a seismic domino effect that scientists are racing to understand. It suggests that the greatest danger might not be a single earthquake, but a chain reaction of destruction that could unfold over hours, days, or even decades. To grasp how one earthquake could possibly beget another, we first need to journey deep inside the Earth. The planet's outer shell, the lithosphere, isn't a smooth, seamless sphere. It's a fractured mosaic of about 15 major tectonic plates, colossal slabs of rock floating on the molten mantle below. Driven by immense convection currents, these plates are in perpetual, glacial motion. As they move, they collide, pull apart, or grind past one another at their boundaries. These interactions are anything but smooth. Friction causes the edges of these plates to lock together, even as the rest of the plate continues to move. For years, decades, or even centuries, immense strain builds up in the rock. This stored energy, called elastic strain, is like coiling a titanic spring. When the accumulated stress finally overcomes the friction, the rock fractures and the plates suddenly slip along a fault line. That pent-up energy is violently released in the form of seismic waves, which we experience as an earthquake. This process of slow strain buildup and sudden release is known as the elastic rebound theory, and it's the fundamental engine of nearly all earthquakes. These faults are not simple cracks. They are a complex, interconnected network. They can be massive, like the San Andreas Fault, marking the boundary between the Pacific and North American plates, or smaller, localized fractures. Geologists classify them into three main types based on how they move. Normal faults, where one block of rock drops down relative to another. Reverse, or thrust faults, where one block is pushed up and over another. And strike-slip faults, like the San Andreas, where the blocks slide horizontally past each other. It is along this intricate web of faults that the drama of earthquake triggering unfolds. For a long time, the story was thought to end with the main earthquake and its immediate aftershocks. But we now know that faults can talk to each other across hundreds, even thousands of miles. There are two primary ways this seismic communication happens. The first is called static stress transfer. Imagine you have a long, taut rubber band. If you were to snip it in the middle, the two halves would snap back, releasing tension at the cut. But this action would increase the tension at other points along the band. An earthquake does something similar to the Earth's crust. The slip on the fault permanently redistributes the stress in the surrounding rock. Some areas will actually experience a decrease in stress, creating what scientists call stress shadows, where the likelihood of another earthquake is temporarily reduced. But in other areas, the stress will increase, effectively squeezing nearby faults and pushing them closer to their own breaking point. A key tool for mapping this is the Coulomb stress model. It calculates the change in what's called Coulomb failure stress, which considers two things: the change in shear stress, which is the force pushing the sides of a fault past each other, and the change in normal stress, which is the force clamping a fault together. An increase in the pushing force or a decrease in the clamping force brings a fault closer to rupture. The Coulomb model has been incredibly successful in explaining the patterns we see. For instance, following the 1992 Landers earthquake in California, scientists mapped the Coulomb stress changes and found that the vast majority of aftershocks lit up precisely in the zones where stress was calculated to have increased. It's a permanent nudge, a lasting change in the seismic balance sheet. The second, and perhaps more dramatic mechanism, is dynamic stress transfer. If static stress is a permanent nudge, dynamic stress is a vigorous, temporary shake. When a massive earthquake occurs, it radiates immense energy in the form of seismic waves that ripple through the entire planet. These waves, particularly the slow-moving surface waves, can circle the globe multiple times from a truly powerful quake. As these waves pass through a distant fault line that is already critically stressed and close to failure, that temporary jolt of energy can be the final straw. It can be just enough to initiate rupture. This dynamic triggering can happen almost instantaneously as the waves pass, or it can start a more delayed process. For example, the shaking from the waves can change the fluid pressure within the pores of the rock in a fault zone, which can weaken the fault and lead to an earthquake hours or days later. We've seen this happen time and again. The magnitude 7.3 Landers earthquake in 1992 dynamically triggered small tremors as far away as Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. The colossal 2004 magnitude 9.1 Sumatra earthquake, which caused the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami, triggered small quakes at vast distances across the globe. Some studies have even presented statistical evidence that the biggest earthquakes can trigger seismic activity on the exact opposite side of the planet, a testament to the far-reaching influence of these seismic ripples. This isn't just theory and computer models. The Earth's own geological history is riddled with evidence of these cascading events. One of the most classic and frankly terrifying examples is the North Anatolian Fault in Turkey. This is a major strike-slip fault, very similar in its mechanics to California's San Andreas Fault. Beginning in 1939 with a devastating magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Erzincan, an astonishing sequence began. It was like a lit fuse burning its way along the fault line. A series of major earthquakes systematically ruptured segments of the fault, progressing from east to west. There was a quake in 1942, then 1943, then 1944, another in 1957, and one in 1967. Each rupture loaded stress onto the adjacent, unruptured segment to the west, preparing it for the next major event. This deadly march of destruction culminated in the 1999 Izmit earthquake, a magnitude 7.6 event that struck one of the most densely populated and industrialized regions of Turkey, killing over 17,000 people. Seismologists who had been studying this clear westward progression had even warned that the Izmit region was the most likely candidate for the next major event. It is a tragic, textbook case of a fault line cascade driven by static stress transfer. Closer to home for those in the United States, the 1992 Landers earthquake sequence in Southern California's Mojave Desert was a complete game-changer for seismology. It wasn't one neat rupture on a single fault. The sequence actually began 2 months earlier with the magnitude 6.1 Joshua Tree earthquake to the south. Then, on June 28th, the main shock hit, a powerful magnitude 7.3 that didn't just stick to one fault. It jumped across several different, previously recognized faults, tearing a complex 50-mile-long gash in the desert floor. The drama wasn't over. Just 3 hours after the main shock, the magnitude 6.5 Big Bear earthquake was triggered on a separate, nearby fault. The Landers sequence was a Rosetta Stone for seismologists. The Joshua Tree quake is thought to have increased the static stress on the fault segment that would later rupture in the Landers main shock. The Landers earthquake, in turn, dramatically increased the stress at the precise location of the Big Bear event, triggering it. It was a powerful real-world demonstration of the domino effect and revealed the shocking potential for complex, multi-fault ruptures in a seismically active region. But perhaps the most sobering possibility of all involves a tale of two titans of the seismic world, the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas Fault. Cascadia is a 700-mile-long monster fault that runs offshore from Northern California all the way to British Columbia. It's a subduction zone where one tectonic plate is diving beneath another, and it is capable of producing terrifying megathrust earthquakes of magnitude 9.0 or greater. At its southern end, this behemoth meets the northern end of the world-famous San Andreas Fault at a complex junction. Geological research, led by scientists like Chris Goldfinger at Oregon State University, has unearthed evidence of a startling connection between these two giants. By studying sediment cores drilled from the deep ocean floor, which record the history of ancient earthquakes and layers of mud, they have found a recurring pattern. For nearly 3,000 years, it appears that a majority of the great earthquakes on the Cascadia subduction zone were followed, often within years or a few decades, by major ruptures on the northern San Andreas Fault. The evidence suggests a north to south rupture direction, with the massive Cascadia quake triggering the San Andreas event. The last great Cascadia earthquake occurred in January of 1700, an event documented in tsunami records in Japan. And historical evidence suggests the San Andreas Fault also ruptured in Northern California, right around that same time. While there is still scientific debate about how certain this link is, with some seismologists urging caution due to the different mechanics of a subduction fault versus a strike-slip fault, the evidence for some kind of interaction is compelling. The prospect of a 1-2 punch from two of the most powerful fault systems in North America is a scenario with profound and terrifying implications. Of course, while our understanding has advanced significantly, predicting when or where a triggered quake will occur remains a formidable challenge. The Earth's crust is an incredibly complex system, and we have an incomplete picture of the forces at play deep underground. One of the major debates in seismology revolves around the relative importance of static versus dynamic triggering. Static stress changes are permanent, but are generally quite small. Dynamic stresses from seismic waves can be much larger, but they are transient. Untangling which mechanism is the dominant trigger in any given situation is a very complex task. Another area of active debate is the concept of seismic gaps. This is the idea that a segment of an active fault that hasn't had a major earthquake in a long time, compared to other segments, is overdue. The theory is that these gaps are quietly accumulating strain and are therefore more likely to be the site of a future rupture. The devastating 2015 magnitude 7.8 earthquake in Nepal occurred in a well-known seismic gap in the Himalayas. However, the seismic gap hypothesis has also been heavily criticized by some seismologists, who argue that fault behavior is far more chaotic and less clock-like, making it an unreliable predictor. There is also the challenge of remote triggering. Some scientists remain skeptical about the statistical evidence, suggesting that an apparent increase in small earthquakes around the world after a large event could simply be a coincidence. As prominent seismologist Ross Stein has said, "We don't have a smoking gun. We have to build a statistical case, and we have a strong one. It's a science built on probabilities, not certainties." So what do we do with this unsettling knowledge? The growing understanding of fault line cascades has massive implications for how we assess seismic hazards and prepare for the future. Risk assessments that only consider individual faults in isolation may be dangerously underestimating the true danger. This is especially true for our critical infrastructure. Think about power grids, transportation networks, water pipelines, and communication systems. A cascading earthquake scenario could cause a cascade of infrastructure failures, crippling a region's economy and its ability to respond. The question then is this knowledge being incorporated into public policy and building codes? For the most part, building codes are designed to prevent collapse and protect human life in the event of shaking from a single, nearby earthquake, but they are primarily focused on just that, a single event. The idea of a second major earthquake, striking while a region is still reeling from the first, presents a whole new level of challenge. A building that is damaged but not collapsed by the first quake could be much more vulnerable to the second. This is where the concept of performance-based design becomes crucial. Instead of just designing a building not to collapse, this approach seeks to ensure a building can continue to function after an earthquake. This is vital for critical facilities like hospitals, fire stations, and emergency response centers, which we need to be operational when disaster strikes. And for all of us as individuals and communities, the knowledge of earthquake cascades underscores the vital importance of public preparedness. If one major earthquake could be a harbinger of more to come, it becomes even more critical to have emergency plans and supplies that can last for an extended period, well beyond the standard 72 hours. The Earth is a dynamic and ever-changing planet, and earthquakes are a dramatic expression of its inner life. The discovery that these powerful events are not always isolated incidents, but can be part of a larger, interconnected sequence, has added a new layer of complexity and urgency to the study of seismology. While the ability to predict the exact time and place of any earthquake, let alone a triggered one, remains beyond our grasp, our growing understanding of the fault line cascade phenomenon is a crucial step towards building a more resilient future. By continuing to listen to the rumbles from deep within the Earth, we can better prepare for the day when the ground beneath our feet once again begins its violent dance. Thank you for listening to G Fun Facts Online.